Madam President, scores and scores of my friends and neighbors at home in Oregon have been grieving since they learned the sad news this weekend about the passing of a remarkable woman, Mary Gautreaux, who died at her home over the weekend. Mary Gautreaux was an astounding bundle of energy and passion. She had an incandescent smile, a huge heart for people who didn't have any power and clout, and the ability to make just about everybody she met more optimistic about the policies and opportunities for the days ahead. Mary came to our office back in the 1990s after working at the U.S. Forest Service, planting trees and fighting fires. I can tell you no resume or job title could have ever captured what Mary Gautreaux was all about, or how hard she worked to protect the qualities that make Oregon different, the very special place she was proud to call home. Mary Gautreaux, simply stated, was an all-star Oregonian. She loved her family and her co-workers with fierce loyalty. All of Mary's friends and neighbors knew up close and personal what an indomitable force she was. And it didn't matter where you lived, from Portland to Burns, everywhere in between, Democrats, Republicans, independents, the left, the right, mayors, county officials, everybody liked being with Mary. They liked working with Mary. They admired her professionalism, and they were so impressed that she always tried to involve everybody. She always wanted everybody to believe that they were special, that they counted. And that's something we'll always remember. My office saw her as an anchor, as I did personally. For the better part of 2 decades, she and I traveled to hundreds of town halls and community meetings in every nook and cranny of our state. And Mary and I always shared a kind of special joke. At one of these town meetings, somebody invariably would ask me something that I didn't know a lot about. And I would always say the same thing. I would say, folks, I want you to know I'm really digging into that issue. But Mary Gautreaux is one of the leading authorities on the subject. And she'd be rolling her eyes, and then I'd say, well, feel free to call Mary nights and weekends. She's always available for people. And my sense is she got a kick out of it the first 100 times I did that. And it's a special kind of bond, we had that was vintage Mary Gautreaux. But the fact is, she really did make herself available. Always, anytime, any day. She was always ready to pick up the phone and travel the state to solve a problem. If I were to talk about all the accomplishments, all of the results she produced for the people of Oregon, we'd be here till New Year's Eve 2020. I do want to talk about a handful that stand out for their exceptional breadth and impact. Mary Gautreaux was an early advocate of reopening the Willamette River for the benefit of everybody in Portland. She knew it had the potential to be a treasure for the community. She was out there swimming every chance she could get and loved every time she could get out into the Willamette. She recognized that not everybody had her physical abilities. So as was always her way, when Mary recognized a problem that needed fixing, she got to work. So she pushed locally with the city and community activists to get a ladder installed at a popular swim spot. As a result of this kind of effort, and frankly, her imagination, I don't know that finding ladders is always in the job description, but she just figured out how more people could have the opportunity to get in and out of the Willamette safely and take a swim in one of the country's most impressive urban rivers. The whole metropolitan area of my hometown has her to thank for other important achievements. We have exceptional drinking water. Mary was instrumental in the creation of Portland's Bull Run Water Reserve being still. I believe now the only urban water source closed to people entirely for its protection. Everybody in Oregon, as they learn about this, because Mary never sought any publicity for herself, really has to thank Mary Gautreaux for that effort. And she really went to bat for rural Oregonians. She recognized, because I live in Southeast, she lived in Northeast. We love Portland. But we didn't have the job of representing the state of Portland. It's to get into every nook and cranny of our state. And particularly when so many rural communities are so hard hit. Mary would be there helping small airports, tiny airports, get bigger, helping veterans who couldn't get over icy roads to get to health care in the urban areas. She'd help with food pantries to rural hospitals. She did everything to make sure that in those small communities, they would understand that they counted. Sometimes people would point out to her, a lot of those communities had more cows than people. And I always thought to myself, I probably didn't have the cows with me half the time either. That wasn't Mary's measure of public service. Mary's measure was to make sure that nobody was left behind. One of her recent accomplishments for rural Oregon is also going to be treasured for a long time. The designation of the Frank Moore Wild Steelhead Management Area. Frank Moore and Mary had a wonderful bond. Frank is a World War II hero. After the war, he came home to the Umpqua River. He's guided generations of fishing families on the river for years and years. Now he's 96. And Mary made a judgment a few years ago that she was concerned that Frank might not get the designation and recognition he deserved while he was alive. So Mary basically just pushed and pushed and pushed in order to make sure that the legislation I just mentioned would pass and actually get done. And what a wonderful party we had for Frank Moore, because if there was something Mary Gautreaux loved, it was a good party. And you'll hear a little more about that in just a moment. On the national level in Southern Oregon, Mary's work on the designation of the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument created unique wilderness protections for ranchers and environmental folks, something that's going to be a model for generations to come. She was the key to the creation of the Badlands Wilderness. And I remember, Madam President, when Mary Gautreaux pulled it off, people said, because of Mary, it was a good day for the Badlands. A wonderful accomplishment for folks in Central Oregon. And in Eastern Oregon, Mary's work on the East Moraines and the Wallowas was significant. She helped Oregonians everywhere, and she always tried to look ahead. Mary was one of the first who recognized in our state that recreation would be a powerful economic engine for years to come. Billions of dollars coming to the state. Jobs for everybody from kayakers to guides to craft brewers, a huge economic, multiplier. So what did we get out of it? We also got a chance to have a new focus on recreation. We've seen created Oregon's Office of Recreation. It's a state office born out of Mary's tireless work, organizing people all over the state to highlight the 7 wonders of Oregon. Madam President, I'm here to say tonight that Mary Gautreaux, for lots of us, was the 8th wonder of Oregon. Now, all of these achievements are part of her enduring legacy in our state, places people will visit, lands that are protected, ranchers, environmentalists, people who before Mary showed up might hardly ever talk to each other, let alone work together. She figured out a way to find common ground and achieve what I've just described. I want to talk a little bit about travels with Mary. The laughs that we have on the long car rides, bouncing around ideas, occasionally a passionate debate on something that was important to Mary. She always recognized, like Patton, that an army marches on its stomach. She generously stocked her car with apples and oranges and fruits and every manner of snack, healthy, some perhaps not so healthy, as we drove around Oregon. But let me tell you something, when Mary Gautreaux saw hungry folks as we made our way through the state of Oregon, what she did essentially along the way is make sure that, because she didn't want anybody to go hungry, she made sure that our car got a whole lot lighter because she gave away so much healthy food to hungry folks who were hurting. No task seemed trivial or thankless. But I'll tell you, when you rode around in a car with her, and most of the time in government, people are talking about bills and amendments or polls and the like. What Mary was always talking about was how it might be possible to help more people at the next stop. And the key was at the end of a trip, she would always say to a person or two, "Give me your phone number. I want to be able to stay in touch. I want to check in." Because that's the way she was. And sometimes she'd ask them to give her a name or two of somebody else who'd fallen on hard times. Another memory I wanted to share is a little bit raw, and the Senate may know how it's going to play out in the months ahead. A few months ago, while she lay in her hospital bed, coming to terms with a fresh diagnosis of terminal cancer, she learned that a group of young doctors at the Oregon Health Sciences Center had been in training to do a rotation in Ontario, Oregon, Malheur County. A city of 11,000 people, a gateway to the Oahe Canyon lands, spectacular high desert landscapes that were near and dear to Mary's heart. So Mary said, we better do something for all these young doctors. So she began asking for their supervisor so she could help these young doctors get out into the landscape. Well, I do want people to know that there's going to be an opportunity to enjoy that landscape, work in that landscape, particularly in traditional industries like agriculture, to a great extent because of what Mary inspired in Malheur County, dedicating her last days to talking to anyone and everyone that she thought could come together and help stabilize this small community in Eastern Oregon. And Madam President, I want people to be able to picture it, because Nancy and I went to Mary's home in Northeast Portland over these last difficult weeks. Mary always managed to cheer us up rather than vice versa. And one of the things that finally made us smile is her whole bed and the hospice folks nearby. Her whole room was built around the maps of the Oahe, where she was looking at places that various uses would be appropriate for, how to protect the beauty of this extraordinary part of Oregon. You talk to her about the beauty, she'd always say, the first time I saw it, it brought tears to her eyes when she viewed it. And she so wanted to help the ranchers and folks in that area. She was dedicated to preserving this part of the world. And Madam President, it was Mary Gautreaux's dying wish that we could make this possible. And colleagues may have seen me waiting on the floor of the Senate over the last few hours. Our chair, Senator Murkowski, has had a busy schedule today. and I chaired the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. We worked very close together. Lisa Murkowski has a big heart too, always interested in trying to bring people together. And I told Chair Murkowski that very shortly I was going to be introducing legislation to recognize Mary's extraordinary work. We were going to have a community board to empower the ranchers and the small businesses and the families that have been there for years and wanted to know that there was a future. We wanted to call it the Mary Gautreaux Malheur County Community Empowerment Act, or the Mary Gautreaux Malheur County CEO Act. So, Madam President and colleagues here, stay tuned, because you are going to hear me talk more about Mary's extraordinary efforts in this regard. This weekend, we're going to do what Mary Gautreaux wanted us to do. We talked to her about it. We said, Mary, we want to make sure that we tell Oregon, and in this case the country, about your life and your accomplishments. And Madam President, how much we loved her. And the way we're going to show her how much we loved her, this weekend, we're going to do what she wanted. We are going to have one heck of a giant party in her neighborhood, at her home in Northeast Portland. We're bringing together friends and family. She has so many of them. I'm looking down this row, Madam President. I guess we broke most of the rules of the Senate because you're only supposed to have a couple people here. And as far as I can tell, if the people I'm honored to represent in the United States Senate, there are more than 4 million of them, half of them would have showed up and sat with the folks on that row. So this weekend, we're going to have a chance to tell each other stories. We're going to have a chance to talk about all the people Mary helped. I'm working now, because Mary loved bright colors, to make sure that her home and everybody there really sees that what she wanted was a lot of color and a lot of passion and a lot of friends and a lot of people talking about what a special place Oregon is, and all these young people who've done so much, building on her approach for bringing people together, her values of caring, standing up for people who didn't have very much and were outside the power circle of Washington. So this is a hard talk to give, but it's sure easy to always remember what a wonderful person Mary Gautreaux was, how she represented the very best our state has been able to offer. I told her privately. I told her right before she died, Mary, we love you. We'll always be thinking of you. And Madam President, with that, I yield the floor.